en toute beauté de votre maison jusqu'à votre destination. Votre satisfaction est notre plaisir.
Hot mix mixing.
Hello everyone, welcome to Africa Weekly Report with Ellie Naimal at Tempo Africa TV. This week we are bringing you updates of what has been happening lately in Africa in general. Now, as many of you probably know, gold mining has been something that's been happening in Africa for decades. For beginning of all, civilizations and all the resources that you see around the world. Now, recently, just last couple of weeks ago, there has been a clash between two gold miners and just different tribes of the country that are working in the same field. So in some of the report that we have is a region full of mines is often operated by a multitude of gold miners from all over the country and neighboring states like Libya, Niger, and Sudan as well. So this is very common in the North Africa and the East Africa as well. And it's one of the areas known as an hostile zone where it is almost lawlessness. There's a lot of chaos. It's like Wild Wild West on some of the claims that have been made. And everyone goes there because there is gold. And there are also a lot of conflicts in digging out a lot of these golds. So recently on May 23rd, 100 people has been announced dead in a clash of gold miners in the desert of northern Chad, which is in the upper north of North Africa, closer to the neighbor country like Libya and Sudan as well. So it's one of the largest countries right now with gold and gold minings as well. And this is not the first time that you hear a lot of these incidents or cases that happens in the gold mine field. But these clashes between the gold miners in the region, the officials have decided to suspend all gold mining in Kuri until further notice. Knowing the vast majority are illegal, said one of the officials, Yahya Braham. And some of the things that were stated by the communication minister said that the clashes more than 1,000 kilometers northeast of northern N'Djamena had resulted in loss of lives and several injuries, claiming that the clashes were mainly between people from Mauritania and Libya as well. So rest in peace to those that have lost their souls in the mining field. And some official also claimed the defense and security forces did not fire at all, and there were no more than 200 deaths, maybe less than that. And this is what some of the officials are saying and claiming on site. And it also has taken place under the complicit gaze of the forces of the order. So some of these are being called as an order by the people who are in charge, or it could be the ministers of the countries in order for this to take place. And with some of these really harsh conditions, I mean, these are young Chadians from the century of the country who have been handed over to the gangs for whom they work for, and in this very difficult and precious security conditions. So it's not an easy job, and it's definitely not a safe job. But you mostly will see a lot of young children that are in this mining due to the poverty, due to the lack of, support to support their family. So they're willing to risk their lives however it takes in these conditions to make a little to have in their home, or even just food to eat. And so, as has been mentioned, it's not new in Africa. So deadly clashes between the Libyan Arabs and the inhabitants of the Quadian, which are from the east, had already killed several dozen of people since January 2019. Now, going on to the next incident that took place is a hospital was on fire and have lost 11 children, 11 newborn babies. And it was an approach to the Mother's Day. So imagine being a mom for the first time and you lost, or maybe not the first time, just being a mom in general, and you lost your child right at birth in this hospital. It's a very, very tough tragedy to handle. And, heart goes out to all those mothers, indeed. And with the 11 children, they have been buried in a closed-door cemetery. Would the families affected by this tragedy begin receiving aid on Sunday, which the mayor announced? They also, the mayor have also said that we sympathize with the pain of the family, and today is Mother's Day in Senegal, and there are 11 mothers who have lost their children, he also added. The tragedy underlines the more of the attention in the field of health in favor of families and children. So they are working on a lot of these accusations and what happened and what took place and how they can make it better for the future. I mean, this is a very shocking news to many of us in the health field industry, especially losing your newborn baby. There were accusations of negligence that were made, and witnesses reported the fire spreading rapidly in the natal unit as well. And the staff and the user powerless, they used as much power as they can to save the children. There were some electric shortage circuit that might have been there. And what happened at the Mami Abdul Aziz hospital is yet to be established. However, the mayor assured us that 2 carriers were in the ward at the time. So on Friday, the Senegalese president, Macky Sall, acknowledged the tragedy of the Senegal's health system and ordered an audit on the natal services, that the public hospital is no longer a place of tragedy. So hopefully that all clears out by now. And on to the next, there's a coalition for parliament election that is taking place where these guys are uniting together to go against the president of the country before the next election, so that he no longer rules the country anymore for another year. And on Friday, the 2 Senegalese opposition conditions have joined forces to prepare for the legislation election on July of this year, with the intention to be the majority in the parliament against President Macky Sall's running party and to prevent him from running for a 3rd term. Enough is enough for the people. Mamadou Diallo, a member of the opposition, laid down the game plan. And here are the game plans he had mentioned. There are about 3 of them that I will mention out to you guys. First plan is to take control of the National Assembly, to repeal the laws of the current regime used by Macky Sall to destroy the Senegalese democracy conquered through several generations of activists and the patriots, and the price of the heavy sacrifices. Secondly is to achieve the parliament turnaround with a National Assembly that is reconciled with the Senegalese people. So the people have to stand behind this. It's all part of the plan and is all part of the process. And that is representative and which impose on Macky Sall responsible governmental cohabitation as well. Last but not least, which is the 3rd one, is to block the prospect of Macky Sall running for a 3rd illegitimate and unconstitutional term in the 2024 presidential election. So let's see how all this turns out. Will the game plan work? Will it go as planned? According to some of these game plans that have been laid out, and we can only wait to find out. The Walloon Senegal condition, led by former president, concluded on alliance with Yawi Askan Wi, which are some of the names that are hard to pronounce, with the motto, "Let's free the people," led by the embattled Sanko several weeks ago. So it's a great model. It's something that will get the people moving as long as it is for the people. The people are willing to stand and fight for it because the majority are the powerful ones. And as they also stated, we were Republican. That's why we canceled our demonstration. Besides, several opposition youth were determined to march today. But next Wednesday, we will sound a big mobilization, and nobody can prevent us from doing our demonstration. This has been said by Sanko, one of the members of the opposition. So July 31st elections are meant to renew about 150 seats for the members of the parliament. And on July legislation elections, follow local elections in March, which is won by the opposition in several majority cities, such as Dakar, South, and the West as well. Now, lastly but not least on the report, how the Russian and the Ukrainian war is affecting Africa. Now, here's one of the meetings that just took place recently. This was a Putin and the African Union meeting to talk on the food supply, the food chain, and what they can do next and what is the solution. They are trying to find a solution to what is affecting Africa. Even though the war may be far from home or it's not a close threat to Africa at all, it still affects the African countries economically due to all of the chain, the tie chains along with it. So how the Russian and the Ukrainian war is affecting African food supply? Now, here are some of the things that have been mentioned in the meeting. On a Friday meeting, Seoul reminded Putin that 17 African countries detained from voting on the UN resolution condemning the invasion of Ukraine, which is described as a strong pressure to do so, something that is not easy to be done. But it has been brought up to his attention as well. The conversation focused more on how to get stuck grain supplies moving again between Putin and Seoul in Sochi. The chairman of the African Union, Senegal's president Macky Sall, took a stand to warn Russia President Vladimir Putin that African countries are suffering greatly from surging food prices as a result of Moscow military operation in Ukraine. The supply food chain issues brought on the fighting in the Ukraine come as a large portion of the African already were gobbling with drought and other problems as well. So as we know, Africa is there's always issues going on there, especially hunger and famine is one of the big things. So this is only adding more to the problem and the suffer of the people. The United Nations also has warned that 18 million people are facing severe hunger in Sahel, the part of Africa just below the Sahara Desert, where farmers are facing their worst agricultural moment in their production in more than a decade. Another 13 million people face severe hunger in the Horn of Africa region as a result of the persistent drought that is going on. Now, as it has been mentioned in the meeting, if you were to take Asia, the Middle East, and Latin America, it means that there is a good part of humanity which is in fact very attentive to what is happening. It is the name of these hopes that I have come to see you, to ask you to understand that our country, even if they are far from the threat, are victims of the economic level, said Seoul to Putin, according to the Russian and the Ukrainian war. Now, one of the main concerns is to leave out the sanctions. That is what it leads down to, and which is the sanctions on food. Seoul said with the Kremlin view that the Western sanctions have exacerbated grain and fertilizer shortages and call for the food sector to be lifted out of the sanction list. Now, with Russia being the world's largest wheat exporter, has urged the West to lift sanctions imposed over its military action in Ukraine so the grain starts flowing freely to the global markets, back to the global markets. The UN fear there is a huge hurricane of famine that is coming if this is not done or it is not lifted. And this has a huge effect on the African people and the economy as well, including the farmers. So mainly in African countries, which import 44% of their wheat from Russia and Ukraine between 2018 and 2020, especially since no ship can leave Ukrainian port because of the conflict. The African Development Bank also added that wheat prices have soared around 45% as a result of the supply disruption. And we urge to lift sanctions. Now, some of these sanctions, as we see, the inflation is going high around the world, including Africa, some of the poorest nations in the world. And with the inflation skyrocketing, it's almost impossible to survive. So, and hope this meeting goes well and finds a good result and a solution to it. But the argue continues as well. While the food and the fertilizer are exempt, sanctions have targeted Russian shipping and made international shipping companies reluctant to transport Russian cargoes. With Ukraine being one of the world's largest exporters as well of wheat, corn, and sunflower oil, Ukrainian authorities and the West have accused Russia of blocking Ukrainian ports to halt exports, endangering world food supply. They're going back and forth in this whole situation. But Russia has also denied the claim of blocking Ukrainian ports and called on Ukraine to remove mines to allow shipping to continue. And the Ukraine reported back saying they have agreed to the decision, corridors in principle, but voiced concern that Russia could use them to attack Odessa and other Ukrainian parts, exacerbating ongoing problems. So with the conflict in Ukraine, world leaders have ramped up calls for solution. World Trade Organization Director Ngozi said about 25 million tons of Ukrainian grain are in storage right now. And another 25 million tons could be harvested next month. Now that's a lot of grain and a lot of food to be hoarded and to be stored by. I mean, all because of what? The war and the sanctions and things that are left out. And maybe a lot of these arguments as well and a lot of these claims could also involve the Western world. With the Western world, they are part of this whole problem with the high sanction on Russia and Russia fighting on Ukraine. And yes, it does affect the rest of the world. So we'll continue to watch how things goes on and see you guys next Saturday on more reports.
C'est encore Yves Kenao, c'est toujours Yves Kenao qui revient. Cette fois-ci, pour vous dire que Tempo Afrique TV vous offre plus de 4000 chaînes de télévision. Les chaînes européennes, les chaînes américaines, les chaînes asiatiques, les chaînes africaines. À un prix imbattable. À un prix imbattable. Tenez-vous bien. $185 pour 12 mois, inclus le box. Alors, où est-ce que vous pouvez trouver mieux que ça si ce n'est pas sur Tempo Afrique TV? Mesdames, Messieurs, appelez seulement le 612 804 0295 et vous serez servi. Vous serez agréablement surpris de voir plus de 4000 chaînes de télévision rouler sur votre écran comme ça et vous choisissez laquelle vous voulez. Alors mesdames, n'hésitez pas. N'hésitez surtout pas et ne vous faites pas compter. Prenez votre téléphone, prenez-le tout de suite et appelez le 612, le 804, le 02 95. Nous sommes là, ici à Tempo TV, pour rendre votre vie simple et agréable. alors saisissez l'occasion. Donc, $185 pour toute une année, pour 12 mois, inclus le box. Quoi de mieux que ça?
My whole life, my father told me stories about moving to the United States. He would tell me that his brother, my Uncle George, was already living here and let my father stay with him for a while. Through my Uncle George, my father was introduced to our cultural organization here in America, who helped him make connections, apply for college, find his first job, and adjust to life in a completely different culture than he was used to. The Cultural Association helped him get started on his new life. My Uncle George would bring my father with him to the annual Summer Cultural Groups Festival, and later, he would bring me. It was incredible to see so many people of all ages laughing and celebrating with food and song and dance. It brought back the best feelings of home and gave my father the opportunity to pass his culture, language, and values on to me. My father and Uncle George were very close, so when George died last year, my father wanted to honor his wishes to be buried with a traditional ceremony back at his birthplace. My father told me that because Uncle George had cultural group life insurance, he was able to afford to bring George home and have the traditional burial George wanted. Though my father had been able to honor my Uncle George's wishes, it got me thinking about my own family. One day, I'd have to make the same arrangements for my own parents and my wife's parents as well. Of course, we would want to bring them home and honor their wishes, but it would be a financial hardship for our family. There were a lot of things to think about, even though I really didn't want to think about them at all. When my father told me about cultural group life insurance, he told me it's intended to help families when they need it the most. It's not tied to an employer, so no matter where my career takes me,